This woman was in for an unwanted surprise when she found a lynx and her kittens on her doorstep. She hoped the cats would leave on their own, but the woman soon realized something strange about them and called the vet. When he arrived and saw the lynx and her kittens, he turned pale. Lynx brings kittens to woman's door. When the vet sees them, he turns pale. Sophia started her day like usual by making herself a hearty breakfast. As she was buttering her sandwich, she suddenly heard a weird noise. A frown appeared on her face. It sounded like some sort of animal call, like a cat, but not entirely. Curious about what was making the sound, Sophia decided to look. She walked toward the front door, as that was where the sound seemed to originate from. But as she reached the door, her body suddenly froze. Through the small window in the door, Sophia could see a giant lynx with a litter of kittens sitting on her porch. She couldn't open the door. Sophia's mind raced as she paced around her hallway, occasionally looking through the small window. "What do I do? What are these doing here?" she mumbled in astonishment. The unexpected appearance of the cats frightened her, and she decided to let them be, hoping they would just leave eventually. But the cats stayed around the entire morning and kept making noise. This started to drive Sophia mad, and she wanted to get rid of the animals sooner rather than later. But how? She opened up her laptop and searched the internet for possible solutions. One thing became clear: she had to be very careful. Sophia read that lynxes are very shy creatures and get scared by human presence and loud noises, but could bite and scratch to defend themselves. Sophia gathered her courage, and with the protection of thick clothes and armed with pans, she snuck out the back to sneak up on the cats and scare them away. When Sophia carefully looked around the corner, she saw the lynx and her kittens still sitting on her porch. She sighed and mumbled to herself, "You can do this. Come on." Then, she abruptly stepped into the cat's view and slammed the pans together, making noise and trying to scare them off. But the cats were startled by the sudden noise and movement, but when they saw it was coming from Sophia, they just looked at her and started to make lots of noise. Sophia stared at the cats in confusion. They seemed unmoved by her presence and the noise. "This is weird," she mumbled. Even though the cats didn't seem interested, Sophia took a few steps back. Once at a safe distance, she called the vet for help. When she explained the situation, the vet was very surprised by the behavior she described and decided to come over immediately, not aware of the incredible discovery they would soon make. Sophia saw Dr. Turner's eyes widen when he saw the situation before him. "It's like they aren't afraid of us," he whispered to her. He hurried to the back of his truck and took out multiple cages and safety gear. But he was surprised by how easily he could put the animals in the cages. The vet asked if he could inspect the lynxes inside her house because he didn't want to move such small and delicate kittens. "If they stay in the cages," Sophia nodded as she escorted him to the kitchen. There, the vet gave the kittens some food to silence them and started his inspection. Sophia's curiosity caused her to linger as Dr. Turner studied the kittens. He looked at the litter and couldn't hide his amazement. "Their fur and patterns are incredible. It's unlike something I've ever seen before," he said as he noticed Sophia, "but that wouldn't be the most interesting thing about the animals." The vet continued his inspection and took out the kittens one by one. Each one had really nice fur and remarkable patterns, but apart from that, they seemed ordinary. Sophia was happy when she saw Dr. Turner had reached the mother lynx, as things would soon be over. At least, so she thought. Dr. Turner happily continued his inspection and was amazed by how okay the wild animals were with him touching them. But as his hand went through the fur of the mother lynx, he suddenly felt something odd. And when he moved the fur aside and looked closer, he gasped in surprise. The gasp caught Sophia's attention, and she immediately approached the vet. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, but the vet didn't respond and stared at the mother lynx he was still holding on her kitchen table. Sophia followed his gaze, and her eyes widened when she saw a red flashing light between the fur. "What's that?" But Dr. Turner ignored her question again, instead grabbing his bag with equipment and removing a hair clipper. Sophia quickly moved back as the lynx acted out for the first time because the vet shaved some of her thick fur away. That can't be, the vet mumbled, causing Sophia to be even more confused. The confused woman asked Dr. Turner what was going on. The vet gestured for her to come, and Sophia approached carefully and hesitantly. He was holding the lynx tightly, and now that she was shaven, something was clearly visible on her body. "It's a tracking device," the vet said in a worried tone. "Are you sure?" Sophia asked, confused. Dr. Turner explained that he frequently implanted these devices on cats and dogs. "But this one was done by someone inexperienced," he said, explaining that you usually wouldn't be able to see such a device, and it was implanted very poorly. But then he suddenly stopped talking. Sophia watched the vet closely as his behavior suddenly changed. He looked from the mother lynx to the kittens and then looked at Sophia, and as he did, she noticed he had turned pale. The fact that the vet's demeanor had changed so suddenly scared her. "What's going on?" she asked anxiously. Dr. Turner gulped before speaking. He explained that there were multiple indications that this lynx wasn't a wild animal and actually belonged to someone. Sophia stared at the man. His response only raised more questions. "So," she asked, slightly frustrated. "That's illegal," the vet responded with a slight tremble in his voice. Sophia tried her best to process what the vet said and understand why he was behaving so oddly. "Isn't it a good thing the lynx managed to escape somehow if it is illegal to hold them?" she asked. The vet sighed deeply and frustratedly before sharing his worries with her. "It's illegal to have a lynx, and most people that have one anyway keep them for breeding," the vet started. He continued by saying this lynx had escaped but was wearing a tracking device. "The people she escaped from have her location and could be looking. They know it's here," the vet added emphatically. Sophia's heart skipped a beat, and all of a sudden, the vet's worries made sense. People who would have an illegal lynx for breeding probably wouldn't be that nice. What had she gotten herself into now? "Can't you deactivate it? Can't you take them with you?" "What do we do?" she rambled. But before the vet could answer any of her questions, they were both startled by a sudden sound coming from outside. Sophia let out a yelp of fright, but she quickly slapped her hands before her mouth to ensure her silence. The room filled with an ominous feeling, and Sophia became scared. Her heart was pounding in her chest. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to him, and her body tensed when he nodded back at her. Her mind instantly pictured there were dangerous men outside looking for the lynx. There the sound was again. It was some sort of high-pitched tone. What was it? Every time the sound was heard, the lynxes let out small cries. Sophia and the vet looked at each other with wide eyes. Would that mean what they feared it would mean? They had to know what was going on, so Sophia sneakily moved toward the nearest window and peeked outside. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the unknown car parked before her house. Reflexively, she moved away the instant she noticed it, but after a short while, she looked again and noticed nobody inside the car. "I think they're already here," Sophia whispered with panic in her voice. She returned to the kitchen and wanted to ask the vet what to do, but then they suddenly heard something that made their blood run cold. On the other side of the wall, they could hear footsteps making their way toward the backyard. The duo looked at the back door with fear. Sophia instinctively grabbed the vet's when a dark figure with a long coat appeared in her yard. Her heart pounded against her chest as she held her breath. The figure had his back toward them and looked around. It was clear that he was looking for something. And then he turned toward them. The man was looking at the thing in his hand, but when he looked up, he stared directly into Sophia's eyes. Sophia didn't dare to move, but then his gaze shifted toward the lynxes on the kitchen table, and he walked toward the back door. The duo hurried away as the figure banged on the door. After a couple of bangs, the man tried to open the door, which wasn't locked. As the man entered her home, Sophia found her voice. "Don't come any closer, or I will call the police," she screamed at him. The figure halted in place and looked scared. "Please don't, I can explain," he pleaded. Before Sophia or Dr. Turner could respond, the mysterious man raised his hands and showed them what he was carrying. "This device can track the lynx. I was looking for it to see if she was safe and healthy, the man explained. Sophia and the vet were surprised by the man's explanation and remained hesitant. The duo gave each other the same look, one of doubt. How do you know about the Lynx? Who are you? Sophia eventually demanded, her voice no longer sounding as scared. And I would be careful of what you say because we will call the police if we don't believe you, she warned. The man shuffled back and forth in place. It was apparent to Sophia that he was nervous, so she closely watched him. The mysterious man introduced himself as Ethan Parker. He told them he knew about the Lynx because he was the reason she escaped. I set her free. The reveal left the duo speechless. Sophia's mind was racing. Who was this man? What did he mean by set free? But before she could ask, Ethan continued with his story. I accidentally became part of a group that crossbreeds lynxes and other animals to create those rare patterns, he said while pointing to the kittens. But I couldn't anymore. Ethan sniffed, and Sophia could hear the emotion in his voice as he talked. The animals live in disastrous conditions, and the group doesn't care about animal welfare. I realized I made a big mistake becoming part of the group and wanted to do something. So when the opportunity arrived, I took it, he said. What opportunity? You're part of the gang? Why shouldn't we call the police? Sophia interrupted him. Ethan pleaded to let him finish explaining. I was the first to notice the lynx's pregnancy, so I set her free before the others would notice. And this was just the beginning. I want to release more, he said. And that's why you can't call the police. I need to stop them, Ethan tried to convince Sophia and Dr. Turner. The duo remained hesitant but were giving him the benefit of the doubt. However, they soon realized there was another reason why Ethan didn't want to get the police involved. If you want to stop this group, why are you here? Sophia then asked, still confused, why Ethan arrived at her house. A slight smile appeared on the man's face before he explained that someone from the group had to search for the lynx as they were chipped. So I volunteered to ensure her escape. With the story fully out there and all their questions answered, Sophia and Dr. Turner discussed the situation. The more they thought about it, the more sense it made. The lynx was raised in captivity, so they weren't shy or afraid of them anymore. They decided to believe Ethan's story, but Sophia and the vet also discussed Ethan's plan, and they didn't agree with it at all. You can't just release all these animals in the wild around here, the vet said, explaining that would only cause trouble. Sophia urged Ethan to call the police and end it all at once by getting the animals the needed help, but then the cat came out of the bag. As Ethan explained, there was another reason why he didn't want to get the police's help. The man explained that he was afraid of getting into trouble, as he was part of the group that was illegally breeding and holding animals captive. At first, Sophia was frustrated that Ethan was withholding some of the truth behind his plan, but she realized that getting angry wouldn't resolve the situation. She and Dr. Turner had to convince him that his plan wasn't well thought out. You aren't alone anymore. We can help you, she offered. The duo saw that Ethan was second-guessing his plan and needed a little nudge in the right direction. We can testify on your behalf and get you a lesser sentence for your part in the crimes, Sophia eventually suggested, and that was enough to convince Ethan to go to the police. Sophia, Dr. Turner, and Ethan got in the vet's truck and drove to the police station. Once there, Ethan took the lead in explaining the situation, and the police immediately took action. They knew about the group's activities, but not the fine lines, which Ethan could now provide. A task force was assembled. Once the police team was ready, Ethan explained that the criminal group was operating from a farm just behind the first lines of trees in the forest. It's actually very well hidden from sight, and the farm is a great cover, but it is so much more than just a farm, Ethan said. The police asked Ethan for a detailed description of the farm and everything around it, and once the team was satisfied, they got in their trucks and drove toward the farm. Sophia and Dr. Turner were brought along to take care of the animals once the criminals were all arrested. The police stopped their trucks outside the forest and instructed everyone to carefully walk the rest of the way. They observed the farm from a distance, and once Ethan signaled that everyone in the group was there, the police conducted the raid, and not much later, the criminals were apprehended. The police gathered evidence at the farm, and together with Ethan's testimony, there was enough evidence the entire criminal organization was taken to court for illegal animal breeding. Because Ethan provided important information for the police, and Sophia and the vet testified on his behalf, he received a reduced sentence. Dr. Turner eventually was asked to ensure that all the farm animals were treated and sent to the right wildlife center. But the lynxes were a special case, so he asked Sophia and Ethan for help. They worked together to reintegrate the lynx into the wildlife and eventually released it in the forest.